This podcast is brought to you by Tāmaki Paengahira, Auckland War Memorial Museum.
Music, at its most basic, is like the decoration of time. But if you've ever rushed to the store to get a physical copy of an album, covered your walls with regrettable holes to put up posters, or survived camping at a muddy festival, you'll know that music is so much more than airwaves. It's something that brings us together and punctuates some of life's biggest moments. At Auckland Museum, our role is to collect and study the history of Tāmaki Makaurau in all its forms. So for Te Marama Pu'oro o Aotearoa New Zealand Music Month, we're looking at some of the unexpected ways music makes its way into the collections and the stories they hold. Not through instruments, CDs or vinyls, but some of the roundabout ways music brings people together and the mementos left along the way. Kia ora, I'm Jenna Borst, your host for this episode of The AMP. The podcast from Auckland Museum that amplifies the incredible stories from our collections, our mahi, and our place in the Pacific. In our Tamaki Herenga Waka Stories of Auckland gallery, a few metres down from our old mate musician Bill Savesi, who you might remember from our ep about the Orange Ballroom, there's a giant picture of another iconic venue, the King's Arms, and an unassuming door you can pry open. There in our beloved museum building, among the art, archaeological finds and stunning taonga, there's a toilet door? And not one that leads you to a toilet either, but an actual cubicle stall door on a wall in our gallery. That toilet door has seen a thing or two in its life for sure. There's a lot of history there. To get to the bottom of it, lol, we're going back to 2018. In 2018, the infamous Auckland bar and music venue, the King's Arms, closed its doors after nearly 140 years in business. Starting its life as a hotel in the 1880s, the two-storey wooden building at the end of France Street South in Eden Terrace stood at the edge of the rapidly changing central Auckland suburb, Newton. Now just a sliver of what it was, the suburb was cut in two to make space for the central motorway junction. Known for being a pretty rough neck of the woods, the King's Arms was a working man's pub before owner Maureen Gordon and her family transformed part of the building into a live music venue in the mid-90s. It became an Auckland icon, beloved by local bands and even hosted international acts like the Black Keys and the White Stripes in the early days of their career. You could brag to all your mates that you saw some of the world's biggest bands at the King's Arms before they could fill up stadiums night after night. Popular as it was, the venue couldn't survive Auckland's need for high-density housing, and in 2016, the site was bought by developers who would later bulldoze the pub to make way for apartments. In the week following its closure, the owners of the King's Arms hosted an on-site auction of all its goodies, from the lighting rig to darts trophies from the sports bar, right down to the posters plastered to the walls in the green room.
Well, we knew that it was shutting down. Myself and other members of the curatorial team sort of knew that that was happening and that we wanted to be able to represent that in some way. So we actually did get in touch with the family, but they just let us know that the auction was coming. And we also knew there was a lot of interest out there because people were already souveniring bits and pieces, like going into the pub and taking things. They stole the sign from the outside, so we were lucky that they did have the auction when they did. Kia ora, my name is Jane Grofsky and I am the Curator of Social History at Auckland Museum Tamaki Paenga Hira.
The museum's social history collection focuses on the social, cultural and environmental history of Auckland City and region. Social history can be really big things like movements and protests, but it can also be the small and the personal, just like a night out with friends, enjoying live music.
Well, it's exciting because it's quite a difficult area of history to collect because of the ephemeral nature of music and the way that people kind of tend to hold on to memorabilia and things like that. It's also something that we don't really get a lot of donation offers for because a lot of people don't really think about museums being interested in this kind of thing in contemporary culture. We're a bit more likely to get offers of christening gowns or grandmothers' clothing, that sort of thing. Older things is what people have that association. So it was exciting that the King's Arms provided this opportunity to grow that part of the collection.
Jane attended the busy auction with a wish list of items we wanted to add to our collection.
So there was a lot of bulk lots, a lot of all the glassware. You could have bought, 20 glasses of a certain kind or a batch of 10 microphones. And so it was quite an interesting mix of, some people were there obviously to buy out bulk and on sale. Others were, musicians wanting a bargain. We were the only ones who were interested in the toilet doors though.
A wish list that might not line up with your usual idea of precious museum items.
We had a list of things we wanted. A couple we weren't able to get. One was a mixing board that they used, which would have been really interesting and significant, but a colleague of mine who's in the music industry, when I'd said we were interested in that, he said, that'll probably go for a lot because as a piece of kit it's quite valuable. So we didn't go for that because we thought that would get bid quite high. We also were looking to get some posters and had written a proposal to acquire these, but because they've got a lot of appeal to collectors, they also got bid beyond what we could achieve. But the other things that we wanted, which we did get, were the toilet doors, the 3 toilet doors from the women's loos. We just wanted them because they're very evocative and a key part of the pub experience. Most people have had that experience of being a bit tipsy in the loo with a pen in your handbag. Or in the case of these toilet doors, sometimes that was just a lipstick that people were using to scrawl on them. And so as objects, they just contain so many references. They have references to current events, to New Zealand bands, and then a lot of messages about the end of the King's Arms and how sad people were. And so they were kind of a memorial element in that, reflecting the depth of feeling about that place.
And we walked away from the auction as proud owners of another colourful item. A time capsule of a habit hopefully not enjoyed in many indoor gigs today.
So the other object was the cigarette machine, the cigarette vending machine, which was really a real relic from another time because smoking had been banned for 14 years already when the King's Arms had shut, so that obviously just kept it in the pub as a kind of curiosity. And we're interested in collecting that just to represent the changing face of attitudes around smoking and around socialising in this kind of environment. And it is quite interesting to look at it today because it's still got all the price tags on it. You can see a pack of 20 Marlboro Lights was $10.50, and which from what I can tell would be about $40 to $50 today. I'm not a smoker myself, but dang.
It's fair to say pub auctions might not be one of the ways you expect museums like ours to add to our collections, but it's a bit more involved than just rocking up with the company credit card.
So regarding the usual process of adding objects to the museum collection, we have a lot more in storage than on display, which a lot of people don't realise, and so therefore we have to have quite a rigorous collecting policy which guides what we collect, and we aim to fill gaps, and we try and include underrepresented themes or communities. And so in order to do this, we have to make a case to bring things into the museum. We have to write an acquisition proposal, and that's to kind of explain the history and the context of the object and justify why we want to bring it into the collection. Because things are in the collection for the long haul, so we really have to be able to justify the resources and the expense and everything that goes into it. In particular, if we have to pay money, we have to get a budget approved and all that sort of thing. So that does make it quite tight turnaround sometimes, especially for for auctions. We had approval basically just as we were about to drive to the auction, so sometimes it can be quite touch and go.
The items collected are strategically chosen to tell stories and mark chapters in our history.
It's important to collect these histories and stories and objects like the toilet doors, because the toys in particular, they represent a kind of spontaneous, informal information sharing that's really hard to capture in other ways. And even since we've had the toilet doors in storage at the museum, colleagues of mine have picked up on things that are written on them that are really personal and interesting or relevant to them. I mean, for example, an Irish colleague mentioned it's got in it written "Repeal the Eighth," which was an unofficial but widely adopted slogan by people in Ireland during the referendum to legalise abortion in 2018, and so it was everywhere. And it's got really poignant that in the women's toilets we've got this very deep, profound, I guess, message around abortion. There was also a friend of mine who noticed there was a memorial to a friend of hers who'd passed away several weeks before the King's Arms shut down, and so that was really special for her to see that and know that was, that memorial was captured in the museum collection. Even had another friend who knew one of the people in the band, a band mentioned, who he reckons she would have been sitting on the loo and writing the name of her band from the level of on the door that it is. So yeah, these objects, they've just got so much going on them.
You can see one of these doors in our Tamaki Hiringa Waka Stories of Auckland gallery.
So we've got 3 doors. They came as a set of 3. We only have one on display at any given time. And one of the reasons for that is to do with the light sensitivity of the materials used on the doors. So they were written on whatever people had to hand, which is a pen, or it could have been lipstick, it could have been whatever they had. And some of these, these materials are quite light sensitive, and so we try to minimise the amount of light coming onto these objects at one time. And so having 3, we can put one on display and after 2 or 3 years rotate it out for the next one, and then just protect the life of those objects.
The doors hold stories co-authored by the King's Arms gig goers, a community brought together through music.
I think that music is, because it's so closely associated with emotion, it can really bring back personal memories about how you felt at a particular time, and it can also be quite political and quite reflective of what's going on in the world. And that's sometimes implicit and sometimes it's explicit, but it just helps build up a bigger picture of the mood of the time. And so if we're not paying attention to these more ephemeral things, then we miss that part of the story, and we miss that history.
Just over from the loo doors, in the same gallery, is a smart-looking choir gown with cuffs at the wrists. With only 4 metres or so between them, a choir mistress's gown and a latrine door might seem like a bit of a storytelling U-turn. But between them, they tell the story of the incubation of musical talent in central Auckland. The same year we were snapping up loo doors, another story was being put together, just 400 metres up the road.
Aloha mai kakau. My name is Andrea Lowe. I am Associate Curator Contemporary World at Tamaki Paengahira Auckland Museum. In 2018, November 2018, PIC, Pacific Island Church in Edinburgh Street, had an incredible exhibition in the Māori Hall, which is just across the road from the church. And Ros Tuitama was somebody who was connected with the curation of that exhibition, and it had an incredible array of te vaivai, family photos, sports photos, arranged in decades around the room. But in the centre of the space was a set of 3 choir gowns, and they had been gifted to the exhibition by the Inari family. So Sefa Inari was who is head of Pacific Dance New Zealand. They were from his family, and they had belonged to his aunt, Epi Fithian. And Epi Fithian was the choir mistress for the Pacific Island Church's choir, and it brought together other denominations and ethnicities that were connected with the church. So there were Niueans. She was from Samoa originally, but there were Niueans and Samoan and Cook Island people in the choir. And one particular choir gown stood out to me, and that was one that had cuffs. The others had loose sleeves at the wrist, but this one had cuffs, and Sefa was able to tell me that that was because when Epi was conducting the choir, she could raise her arms to conduct without the sleeves slipping down.
Before the suburb of Newton was uprooted to make way for the motorway, Newton was a bit of a rough part of town. A 1920s newspaper described it as a haunt of many of Auckland's best-known crooks. When the PIC, officially known as the Pacific Islanders Presbyterian Church Newton, was built in 1947, it would have effectively been on the same street as the King's Arms, about a 5-minute walk. It made a kind of two birds one stone sense to uproot the less than desirable suburb and put in a motorway connecting the different ends of Auckland with the Newton Junction. Out with the crooks and in with the cars. Now, if you stand by the PIC church on Edinburgh Street and you look down across the motorway, sort of to the left, you can see the high-rise housing that cleared the King's Arms out of the way.
The power of the choir at PIC is really important because it brought together different denominations and different island groups, and those island groups used to have their own separate services. So with the choir coming together, it was a uniting force. When you see the photographs of the choir all together, you see what you get is a picture of very smart, beautiful, incredibly well-tailored group looking really great and put together choir. And Epi Fithian was, I think, such a great teacher that she was able to kind of nurture these latent tendencies in people. She was also one of the teachers of the Yandel sisters as they were growing up, who went on to become, they were also associated with the PIC Church, but they also went on to become one of the major New Zealand musical groups of the 60s and 70s and into the 80s as well. So they were all associated with that PIC church choir.
While King's Arms punters may have been wrapping up their nights, tumbling out onto the streets and shuffling on home, another group of music lovers, just 400 metres away, would have been starting their Sundays with song. Through music, both groups would have been bookending their days, maybe even frequented by the same people, those probably not so bushy-tailed and bright-eyed.
People come together through music, through things like rhythm and pattern and emotion, because you don't often sing, particularly in a choir, without giving yourself over to something, and the direction and encouragement from the choir mistress to do your best. And I think she was a very exacting person, so people did want to please her. I think that was some of the driving force, and I think she was also very disciplined. So I think that was some of the driving force in the choir, and so people were united in a way that you might strive to find that kind of connection and emotional engagement outside of a choir. But she was able to bring that out of people.
With choir alumni spanning global opera prestige and one of Aotearoa's most defining girl groups, you can see why Epi's gowns needed cuffs. Honing talents with her swift and snappy conduction, the cuffs are a testament to the musical prowess being nurtured on Edinburgh Street. The PIC Church is special for drawing together different denominations and different languages all under the same roof, united in song. Whether indie, gospel, or something prog rock and weird in between, the communities that made the King's Arms and the PIC Church Special used music to connect. Now, gentrification has drawn a hard line through both these stories. The King's Arms is gone, replaced by high-rise housing. Though the PIC Church still stands, many of its congregation have been pushed to the city's fringes. What survives in both cases is the music, the legacy of talent, community and connection. The choir gowns, the toilet doors, they don't just recall what once was, they hold memory in physical form. They remind us that behind the shifts of our changing city are people, singing, gathering, creating, and that these sounds, though muffled by motorways or fading into archive, still echo with meaning. In capturing these stories, we're not just preserving nostalgia, we're tracing the outlines of communities that shaped the cultural heart of Auckland, even as they come and go. Besides bathroom stall doors and gowns, music trickles into the collections in other smaller and quirky ways.
Are you ready to party this weekend? Radio 98 FM, present Auckland's hottest downtown venue, the Mega Bar. See 5 bands for $5. Yeah, man. Featuring The Narcs, The Mockers, Sunset Boulevard, and Frackers.
Before the internet came along and organised information into tidy, accessible areas, if you wanted to put on your glad rags and bust a move, you'd have to seek out gigs in all sorts of ways. Music fans would rely on newspapers, radio, word of mouth, flyers pinned up in music stores or stuck to lampposts. Local papers would list upcoming shows with all the details, dates, venues, where to buy tickets, and street posters were stuck to all sorts of surfaces. These fragments of information, made to be short-lived and quickly forgotten, have made a special home in our documentary heritage collections.
Kia ora, my name is Nina Finnegan. My title is Curator Manuscripts. I always think it sounds like I should be in the Vatican. But actually, so I look after our manuscript collection, which consists of things like letters and diaries and documents and oral histories, so, recordings of people conducting interviews, and also ephemera, which is what we're here to talk about today.
Ephemera originates from the Greek word ephemeros, meaning lasting only a day. Items that were never meant to last.
I think it's such a beautiful word for a collection. It's one of my favourites at the museum, and I just love that I get the privilege to look after it. So in a music context, that can look like posters, so posters for gigs. It can also look like things like tickets or I guess pamphlets, anything you accumulate. This like detritus is if you're going to a gig or whatever, like a wristband for a big day out, for example. Anything that kind of, you might just chuck it in the bin at the end of the gig or at the end of the festival. But actually we love that stuff. We collect that stuff. We think that it tells us a lot about relationship to music and the social kind of context of music, the cultural context.
Sometimes small, sometimes scrappy, but together they help paint a rich picture of what things were like in the past.
It doesn't try hard, but it tells you a lot of things. Like when you read a letter or something else in our collection, you sort of have to really interpret it. You have to kind of really get into it to get the meaning. But ephemera just kind of reveals all this stuff without trying hard. So like a poster, for example, for a gig, obviously tells us about the band, which might not be in existence anymore. It tells us about a venue, which probably also might not be in existence anymore. But it also reflects things about print culture, so, the handmade or the design aesthetics of that particular time or that subculture. So, we have punk posters that reflect that real, like, rough and ready kind of handmade punk aesthetic. And so there's all kinds of things, type, design. It just, reveals so many things.
Music ephemera comes to us in all sorts of ways.
Most of it's come through donations. Like we have a whole collection of posters that came from an ex-staff member, like years and years and years ago, and basically they would go to the university or wherever and take posters down after the gig had played. So that was all good. It was ethical, and so for those posters, I just love it because they've come from their environment, and often they actually come with like detritus from the world on the back of them. So like if someone ripped them off a bollard or like a lamppost or whatever, and sometimes we have the traces of those that material kind of environment on the back of these posters. So and that's my favourite actually, when they come with this stuff and they've been taken from the kind of place in which they were intended to be seen. And then other times we've bought posters at auction. People collect this kind of ephemera.
Part of Nina's job is to find out things to collect as well, seeking out and bringing together items that tell the stories of Auckland.
So I am on a few Facebook groups. They're sort of like New Zealand specific ephemera groups, including a New Zealand music ephemera group. And it's so much fun. I'm a lurker, I don't share anything, but people, it's a really active community because music is like people's lives, and the ephemera that they've collected over the years is a representation of that deep love, that connection they had to a social group or a subculture or, whatever it might be. And so people are really active in these groups. They're sharing ephemera and they're telling stories and the comments about, a particular gig or a venue that's now gone. And it's just so cool seeing the recollection of that stuff. But also it's always communal because it's people sharing, spurring memories, having a conversation, going back and forth. And so that's what we want. We want memory. We want memories and, to kind of find that connection. I kind of look at these things as really social documents. And I guess by that I mean they sort of represent human togetherness. There's sort of this fun, they're sort of like these moments of communing over music or, when you're at a gig, and for me it's the closest thing to feeling like you're in a church or something, or like you're worshipping at the altar of this particular band or singer or whatever it might be. And for me these documents really reflect that deep kind of human desire to commune and be together. And I think what I love about sharing the ephemera collection is that it sparks those kinds of memories and those kinds of feelings in people. It's sort of like, oh, I remember that, that gig, or I don't know, I met my partner there, or this. Again, it's sort of like these things that don't try very hard, but actually they have such deep meaning, personally and socially and culturally.
History is all around us, even if you don't see it yourself. But if you looked around you right now, thought about what's in reach or what's in your bag, even the smallest things you pick up and use throughout your day can share so much about you and your life.
Ephemera is such a funny thing when people sort of say, what should I keep, or how do I know it's important? And to me, it's just such a personal relationship. So I was talking to a student a few weeks ago, and she was talking about a collection of physical bus tickets she had kept from her time in London or when she was living overseas. And, like to most people, that you just throw them out at the end of your journey or whatever it might be. But for her, this represented something, a time in her life. And I guess for us also, we might collect something like that because we don't use bus tickets anymore. So even though it seems so inconsequential and just not at all important, that's the great thing about ephemera. That's the thing about it's not trying very hard. It just is, and it represents a huge shift in digital culture. And it's a personal thing. It's the thing about ephemera is it does that thing of unlocking a memory. And for a music poster or music ephemera in particular, I think it is personal, but it is that thing about the collective, because music is such a collective experience. And so, I would just say, if it means something to you, keep it.
These fleeting moments are often the most nostalgic and least collected. But what we do have is pretty cool.
Hi. I want to take you to the ephemera store, which is just next to our stacks, and show you some things. And there's a couple of pieces that I really didn't expect to find in our own collection. Come through. Come here.
Finn McCann-Jones is the Senior Collection Manager for Documentary Heritage and friend of the AMP from our very first episode.
Welcome to the ephemera store. Yes, and excuse the humming noise. We have a dehumidifier running 24/7 that just keeps the environment just right for paper. We're in a small room. What would you say? This is a single-sized, maybe or double-sized bedroom. It's not. Yeah, single-sized bedroom, and we've got a whole lot of floor-to-ceiling shelves, and on them are a whole lot of grey cardboard boxes with labels on them, and so we catalogue in the ephemera collection by subject and by certain collectors, and so we can delve into the boxes and find some treasures. And the thing I really love about the ephemera collection is you don't realise what the materiality is. When you use something like a ticket at the time, you don't really think about the design or what it looks like. It's just the ticket. And actually, this is what I wanted to show you in here. We've got some Big Day Out tickets from 2000, 2001 and 2002.
Big Day Out, for those unlucky enough to miss out, was the biggest annual music event on the New Zealand music calendar during the 1990s and 2000s. A star-studded lineup of international superstars like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Coldplay, New Order, The Prodigy, the Arctic Monkeys, Snoop Dogg, literally too many of the biggest acts of all time to count, and heaps of underground legends too. At its peak, 50,000 fans would cram in for what was truly a big day out.
This is like real money. So in my hand I have 3 tickets for the Big Day Out. Friday, January 18th, 2002, Auckland Ericsson Stadium. What I really love about these is the paper is... it's really nice to hold. It's like really good quality. It kind of feels like, if anybody remembers the old money before the paper money that we've got now, it's kind of paper. And look at this, there's even a kind of metallic thread that runs through it, and it's stamped with a holographic symbol. Like, it feels like real money. And I remember going to the Big Day Out at this time, and having one of these is like, you asked for it for Christmas or something, or your birthday, and you held on to it, and you had to look after this kind of real thing. And I was quite amazed to find, we've got 3 in here. Y2K, year 2000, and then 2001. Anyway, I thought that was quite exciting.
In an age where tickets live almost exclusively on our phones as PDFs or screenshots, an old paper gig ticket is a relic from a bygone era. It marks a moment in time and a feeling when someone cared enough to keep that stub, that tiny proof of presence, and later passed it on to the museum. For those of us who once clutched those tickets at the venue doors or felt the panic when you couldn't find yours, it's a powerful reminder. These little scraps of paper and ink can unlock memories we thought we'd forgotten, bringing back the buzz of the crowd, the first chords, the night we saw our favourite band live.
When I was thinking about music in the collection, I thought, do we have much? And I was actually surprised. We've got more than I thought, but lots of the things that have come in are not always for their musicness. And so one of the things I want to show you is just behind you here. It is this. This is the Becky Nunes collection. So she is a photographer and did a lot of catalogues and magazines and recipe books and you name it. She was, if you wanted a cool photo. And then, and here, look, there's a box of CDs. And I really wasn't expecting to see this box of CDs. But the reason why they're in here, here's Fur Patrol Pet, is because she's taken the photographs. Not because of the music, but because that she's done the cover art, which I think is kind of cool. And you forget, look, here's Super 8 Tiger, special price, $24.95. We live in the world with all of these things, and you forget that somebody's designed the microphone or designed the book cover or the CD case in this. And so for me, coming across this little box of CDs, I thought, how cool. Like somebody, you know, Becky has designed it. Look at this one, it's a hologram. There's a whole lot of, there's 4 women on the front and it's, you move it around and they move. It's a CD single. I didn't know that we had CDs, but I like that we've collected them not for the music, but for the design. And so there's so many ways that you can come into the collection, find things in the collection.
And those finds cascade. One discovery leads to another.
So here we are in the stacks, quieter in here, and this is where we have any books, publications that don't fit into our reading room, and we've got museum archive, and we've got our manuscript collection, and up here is another box of, this is where, I don't know if you're the same, at a concert you always want to be like just like 10 centimetres tall, even 5 centimetres taller. It's the same with working in the museum stacks. It's like, see, look just, if I got my tippy toes, I can just hit. Oh. Look at this, so beautifully organised. So in this box we have a whole lot of Becky Nunes's workbooks, and so it's all of her jobs that she did. There's journals of what she was doing, but what's really fascinating is you go through and you start to see all the names, and she did everything from, you know, photographing celebrities through to cheese, you know, it's kind of everything in her book. But it's quite amazing, you know, here she is working on Women's Day, the BNZ newsletter, but of course she does a whole lot of things for music. Oh, here, look, My FM Billboard campaign, Robert Rakete. And so she did, yeah, lots and lots of things. We also have her photographs where she was photographing for Flying Nun, and she was at, you know, photographing at the big day out. It's amazing to see what a professional photographer is actually doing. It's not, you know, I think of Becky's work as predominantly being in that space, but I see that she is everywhere, doing everything, because she's a photographer. And it makes sense. But it's, and same with, like, you realise that there's this kind of a certain aesthetic that you might see in magazines from the time, and it's like, because there was one photographer doing all this. And one of the things in here as well, folder 4.3, here it is. So in here is her music folder. And so, you know, here she's got Which Acts at the Big Day Out in 1994. She's photographing Soundgarden, Courtney Love, Björk, Primus, Smashing Pumpkins, Head Like a Hole, Nude, in close brackets, She Hard, Breeders, Ramones, and then, yeah, Big Day Out 1997. And on it goes, and then same with NZ Local, Tim Finn, Dave Dobbin, Jordan Luck, King Loser, Greg Johnson, Hasselhoff Experiment, Stereo Bus, Headless Chickens, Fur Patrol, Abel Tasmans, Emma Pucky, The Chills, Hello Sailor, Annie Crummer, Garage Land. I mean, pretty cool.
Our photography collections have literally millions of pictures, spanning all areas of life and history.
And one of the things that I really liked was seeing these images from 79 is gig goers look like gig goers, and I thought that was really cool. And you forget that, you know, especially when you're a youth, when you're a teenager, that you feel like you're inventing everything yourself, and you're just kind of wearing different clothes. The style's different, but essentially you're there doing the same thing. And that's another thing I really like about going through the collections, is you make those connections to those different eras.
It's not always easy to picture your parents or your gran as part of the youth scene, that they would have once lined up for gigs, pored over band posters and carefully chosen their outfits to look the part and style their hair to match. Hearing the latest sounds and wanting to be where it was all happening. The love of music and the desire to belong to something bigger than yourself is timeless. It just looked a little different in every decade.
While I've been looking at our music collection, I guess I have been focused on the 90s and early 2000s, just because that's a soft spot in my heart. But we do have, our music collection extends beyond that. So yeah, we've got sheet music, we've got songs, we've got poetry, we've got posters, we've got a oral histories and kind of recorded collection. We've got the occasional record that comes in, but like with the other stuff, a lot of it often isn't collected for its musicness, but more its association.
Whether directly or not, music is everywhere through the collections. It's a reflection of the people who create and consume it. It can be background noise as much as it can come to define communities. When you think of a period in time, the music made famous by it almost immediately comes to mind. Where there are movements, there is music, and decades become synonymous with the genres that defined them. Going to a gig may not feel like a major historical event, but it just might be. Keep your memories, hold on to your treasures, whatever they are. You never know where they'll end up and what stories they'll tell. That was Record Collection, hosted by me, Jenna Borst. This episode was written and produced by Steph Strock and Laura Skerritt. Sound design by Mark Chesterman. The executive producer was Teresa Cowie from Connect Content. Thanks to our guests, Jane Grofsky, Dr. Andrea Lowe, Nina Finnegan and Finn McCann-Jones. For more information about the museum's music collections and to see some cool posters, visit the links in our show notes. If you're enjoying The AMP, please help others to find us by clicking follow, giving us a review, or just telling a mate about us.